This one I kind of started last week. The birth to the rising of our Master, Yahshua. This is part 2. This will be in several parts. I didn't intend it that way, but there's no other way to do it. We'll start at Luke, the 5th chapter, the 1st verse. And it happened that the crowd pressed on him to hear the word of Elohim. He stood by the lake of Gennesaret, and he saw 2 boats standing by the lake. But the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. This is a town of fishermen, generally. And most of them worked hard. And some worked harder than that. Verse 3. And he entered into one of the boats, which was Simon's. He asked him to thrust out a little bit from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the boat. And as he stopped speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep and let your nets down for a haul." And answering, Simon said to him, "Master, we have toiled all night and have taken nothing. Yet at your word I will let down the net." And doing this, they enclosed a great multitude of fish, and their net was being torn. And they signaled their partners, those in the other boat, to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so that they were sinking. And seeing this, Simon Peter fell at the knees of Yahshua, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, Master." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the haul of fish which they had taken. And so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon in this fishing enterprise. And Yahshua said to Simon, "Do not fear, from now on you will be fishing for men." And bringing their boats onto land, forsaking all things, they followed him. And it happened, as he was in a certain city, behold, a man full of leprosy. And seeing Yahshua, he fell on his face and begged him, saying, "Master, if you will, you can cleanse me." And stretching out the hand, he touched him, saying, "I will. Be clean." And immediately the leprosy departed from him. And he commanded him, "Tell no one, but go and show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing, as Moses commanded, for a testimony to them." But the word about him spread even more, and great crowds were coming to hear and to be healed from their infirmities by him. But he was drawing back in the wilderness and praying. And it happened on one of these days, even he was teaching. And Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting by, who had come out of every village of Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem. That's some of the confusion we went into last week. These towns were so close, but the reason that I finally came up with where the confusion came between one town and the other was because everything, it's kind of like Chicago. Every town around Chicago becomes Chicago to anyone that's coming to that town. And the same thing here was Jerusalem. And at the time, the people in Jerusalem had a lot of this. And it was easier to do that, but somehow when it comes to this book, the truth has to be out. The town was really Galilee. And I sent you that last week, the answer. And that was the answer, pretty much. And the power of Yahweh Elohim was there for the curing of them. And behold, men carrying on a cot a man who was paralyzed. And they sought to bring him in and to lay him before him. And not finding a way by which they might bring him in through the crowd, going up on the roof, on the housetop, they let him down through the tiles with his cot into the midst before Yahshua. And if that was my house, but somehow back then it wasn't a big deal because so many carpenters and people like that around, it wasn't much to get it fixed. And the thing was, at the time, they wanted this man healed. And that was the bigger issue to them. Verse 20, and seeing their faith, he said to him, man, your sins are forgiven you. And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, who is this who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins except Elohim alone? But knowing their thoughts, answering, Yahshua said to them, why do you reason in your hearts? Which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven you, or to say, rise up and walk? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralytic, I say to you, arise and take up your cot and go to your house. And immediately he rose up before them and took up that on which he lay. And he departed to his own house, glorifying Elohim. And they were all amazed. Well, not all. Some were amazed by this. And they showed it all the way through this whole series of passages. And they glorified Elohim and were filled with fear, saying, we saw wonderful things today. Then after these things, he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax office. And he said to him, follow me. And leaving all, he rose up and followed him. And Levi made a great feast at his own house for him. And there was a great company of tax collectors and others who were reclining with them. But their scribes and Pharisees murmured against his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" And Yahshua answered and said to them, Those who are sound do not need a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous to repentance, but sinners." And they said to him, "Why do John's disciples fast often and make prayers, and also the disciples of the Pharisees, but yours eat and drink?" He was kind of getting a dig in, but it went away. 34. But he said to them, "Can you make the sons of the bride chamber fast while the bridegroom is with them?" 35. But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then they shall fast in those days. In those days. 36. And he also spoke a parable to them. No one puts a piece of a new garment on an old garment. Otherwise, both the new will tear, and the old does not match the piece from the new. He was talking about the Old and New Testaments. They were coming together as one, and some didn't respect that, but it's all good, and it's all the same when it comes together. That's what he was saying here. Move on to Luke, the 6th chapter, the 12th verse. Luke, the 6th chapter, the 12th verse. And it happened in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray. And he was spending the night in prayer to Elohim, the Father. And when it was day, he called his disciples. And he chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles. That kind of puts the lie to all those in this age who claim to be apostles. He named his apostles, and he here says 12 of them. I count hundreds around the world right now. But he didn't name any of them. 14. Simon, whom he also called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called a zealot, Zelotes. 16. Judas, the brother of James, and Judas Iscariot, who also became the betrayer. Turn to Luke, the ninth chapter, the 1st verse. Luke, the 9th chapter, the 1st verse. And having called together his 12 disciples, he gave them power and authority over all the demons and to heal diseases. And he sent them back to proclaim the kingdom of Elohim and to heal the ones being sick. And he said to them, take nothing for the way, neither staffs, nor money bags, nor bread, nor silver, nor each to have two tunics or cloaks or coats. And into whatever house you enter, remain there and go out from there. And as many as may not receive you, go out from them. Even shake off the dust from your feet for a testimony against them. And going out, they passed through the villages, having announced the gospel and healing everywhere. And Herod the Tetrarch heard all the things happening by him and was puzzled. Should have been. Because of the saying that by some that John had been raised from the dead. And by some that Elijah had appeared. And others said, a prophet of the ancients rose again. And Herod said, I beheaded John. But who is this about whom I hear such things? And he sought to see him. And having returned, the disciples told him what things they did. And taking them, he went out privately to a deserted place of a city called Bethsaida. But knowing this, the crowds followed him, and having received them, he spoke to them about the kingdom of Elohim. And he cured those having need of healing. But the day began to decline. And coming up, the 12 said to him, let the crowd go, that going into the surrounding villages and farms, they may lodge and find food supplies. Because here we are in a deserted place. But he said to them, you give them to eat. But they said, there are not to us more than 5 loaves and 2 fish. Unless we're going to buy food for all these people. For they were, about that time, 5,000 people. But he said to his disciples, make them recline in groups by 50s. What he did here was amazing. And they did so, and made all recline. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looking up to heaven, he blessed them and broke and gave to them disciples to set before the crowd. And they ate and ate and ate and were all filled, from 2 loaves and 2 fish. That was something else. Something else that the Pharisees wouldn't like too much. Go to Yahshua's parable about the great feast. That will be found in Luke, the 14th chapter, the 12th verse. I found this interesting because that Wasn't something I heard a lot. Luke, the 14th chapter, the 12th verse. And he also said to him who had invited him, when you make a dinner or supper, do not call your friends, nor your brothers, nor your relatives, nor rich neighbors, lest they also should invite you in return, and it becomes a repayment to you. But when you make a banquet, call the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and then you will be blessed, for they have nothing to repay you. These warnings, when they come, you have to alert yourself that something different is going on here. And then you will be blessed, for they have nothing to repay you. For it will be repaid to you in the resurrection of the just. And one of those reclining with him, hearing these things, he said to him, blessed are those eating bread in the kingdom of Elohim. But he said to him, a certain man made a great supper and invited many. And he sent his servant at the supper hour. Time wasn't as precious back then as it is now. You could give somebody a date and later you gave them a time. Everything wasn't a fevered rush back then. If it was, you knew something was wrong with it. And he sent his servant at the supper hour to say to those who had been invited, come, for now all is ready. Come to, yeah. Verse 18, and all with one mind began to beg off. The first said to him, I have bought a field, and I have need to go out and see it. I ask you, have me excused. You bought a field. You bought it already and you haven't seen it? Just an excuse. Verse 19, and another said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I am going to try them out. I ask you, have me excused. You bought them already, and you didn't try them out already? Another excuse. Verse 20, and another said, I married a wife. Well, he couldn't try her out. Not legally. But for this reason, I am not able to come, and I won't even touch that one. Verse 21, and having come up, that servant reported these things to his master. Then being angry, the housemaster said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in here the poor and maimed and lame and blind ones. And the servant said, Sir, it has been done as you ordered, and still there is room. And the master said to the servant, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I say to you that not one of those men who had been invited and deferred shall taste of my supper. Each of Yahshua's parables, and this is one, are pointing to various and sundry principles of his coming kingdom. The guests of the Messiah's banquet, well, reaching out there, I better prove this one. Luke, the 14th chapter, the 15th verse. And one of those reclining with him, hearing these things, he said to him, "Blessed are those eating bread in the kingdom of Elohim." From Old Testament times, the Messianic banquet was greatly expected. In the New Testament parlance, however, you see quickly a parallel to the New Testament Passover. The Master let us in on this in Matthew the 26th chapter, the 28th verse. Matthew the 26th chapter, the 28th verse. "For this is my blood of the covenant, which concerning many is being poured out for remission of sins." Hint, hint. "But I say to you, I will not at all drink of this fruit of the vine after this until that day when I drink it new with you in the kingdom of my Father." Get it now? John, the 12th chapter, the first verse. This was an event that all of us have heard of, but every time I read it again, it boggles my mind, the depravity of these men. "Then Yahshua, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served. But Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him." It gets better. "Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Yahshua, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Then said one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which should betray him, why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the money bag, and bear what was put therein. He had whole access to it at any time, and often stuck his hand in the bag. That's why he wanted it to be in the bag. He would have access to it. Verse 7. Then said Yahshua, let her alone. Against the day of my burial has she kept this. For the poor always you have with you, but me you have not always. Much people of the Jews therefore knew that Lazarus was there. And they came not for Yeshua's sake only, but they had to see Lazarus also, whom he had raised from the dead. Some people don't believe anything until they see it. Verse 10. But the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus also to death. The man just came back to life, and the Pharisees were going to re-kill him because they were going to bury the evidence of his miracle. That's kind of rugged. That's kind of rugged. Even for priests, that's kind of rugged. But that's why they're in the position they're in to this day. That kind of cutting up. But the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus also to death. They had already made up their mind that Yahshua was going to die. But Lazarus too. Because that by reason of him, many of the Jews went away and believed on Yahshua. On the next day, much people that were come to the feast, when they heard that Yahshua was coming to Jerusalem, took branches of palm trees and went forth to meet him and cried, Hosanna! Blessed is the King of Israel that comes in the name of Yahweh Elohim. And Yahshua, when he had found a young donkey, sat thereon, as it is written, Fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, thy king comes, sitting on a donkey's colt. These things understood not his disciples at the first. But when Yahshua was glorified, then remembered they these things that were written of him, and that they had done these things unto him. The people therefore that was with him when he called Lazarus out of his grave and raised him from the dead bear record. That's what they didn't want. Somebody bearing record of what happened. For this cause, the people also met him, for that they heard that he had done this miracle. The Pharisees therefore said among themselves, Perceive you how ye prevail nothing? Behold, the world is gone after him. And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. This thing is going worldwide, guys. We got to do something. The same came therefore to Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and desired him, saying, Sir, we would see Yahshua. Philip comes and tells Andrew, and Andrew and Philip tell Yahshua. And Yahshua answered them, saying, The hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat falls into the ground and die, it abides alone. But if it dies, it brings forth much fruit. And that he that loves his life shall lose it. And he that hates his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me, let him follow me. And where I am, there shall also be my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. Now is my soul troubled, and what shall we say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this hour, in this cause, came I unto this hour. Father, glorify thy name. Then came there a voice from heaven saying, I have both glorified it, and notice this, and will glorify it again. The people, therefore, that stood by and heard it said that it thundered. Also said, an angel spoke to him. Yahshua answered and said, the voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all people unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. The people answered him, we have heard out of the law that Christ abides forever. And how say you, the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? Verse 35. Then Yahshua said unto them, yet a little while is the light with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walks in darkness knows not where he goes. While you have light, believe in that light, that you have the children of light. These things spake Yahshua, and departed, and did hide himself from them. But though he had done so many miracles before them, yet they believed not on him. That the saying of Isaiah, the prophet, might be fulfilled, which he spoke, Master, who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of Elohim been revealed? Therefore they could not believe, because that Isaiah said again, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, that they should not see with their eyes, nor understand with their hearts, and be converted, and I should heal them. 41. These things said Isaiah when he saw his glory, and spoke of him. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers, also many believed on him. A few names: Nicodemus and others, but not many. But some did believe, and some we'll never know about because they were too scared to say so. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers also many believed on him. But because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue. For they loved the praise of men more than the praise of Elohim. Go to Matthew, the 26th chapter, the 14th verse, where Judas betrays Yahshua. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests, and said unto them, What shall you give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. And from that time, he sought opportunity to betray him. The rest of that story is in Matthew, the 27th through the first chapter to the 66th verse. And I will continue this next week. Any questions or comments?
Okay, Pastor, so were you making the point that in the great supper in the kingdom will be like the Passover supper with Messiah Yahshua?
One parallels the other. I don't know how they fit together yet, but if you don't be at one, say that right.
It's okay, Pastor.
If you're not at one, that lessens the chance you'll be at the other.
Oh, I see. Thank you, Pastor.
I was on thin ice there because the two of them had never been put in the same room by anybody that we ever taught under. But if you read it for yourself, it becomes very clear that it's the same event or some phase of it. I don't say that it's going to be exactly the same, but he said himself that he would be there, and all the people that were there that night would be there. And in other places, he said that anyone that came there that did his word, and the people that do his word faithfully will be there also. But you gotta link it up in some places, but that was never done. Other people did it, but they had nothing else to offer, but they didn't believe it. But it's there. If you read the book by itself, it's there. Anyone else? I will continue this part 3 next week.